Hey guys, and welcome back. This is an update to my 2015 video on how to create graphical user interfaces in Eclipse using the window builder. It's been brought to my attention that that video is kind of old, that's the nature of technology, and isn't working so well anymore. So we're going to go ahead and do just like we did before. We're going to install new software. And actually, I think you can probably use the Eclipse Marketplace if you needed to, or if you like to, but you know, old dog, new tricks and all that. So we're going to use the link again. Now I'm going to point out that this link is much more convenient than my last video's link because instead of a specific version number, they have the option to use latest, which means that no matter how many years in the future I may be so lucky to have your attention watching this video, it should still hopefully point to the newest and hopefully at least problematic build. So I'm going to go ahead and click these two. Just going to install both of them. I already have them installed, so I actually don't know if it'll let me, but I'm going to go and click next anyways. We're going to load this and see hopefully that it works. I like to use this time while it's loading to give a shout out to my new friends over in the UK, Joseph and his daughter Abigail. I hope that you find this video helpful as you move forward learning about Eclipse. Oh wow, and you could probably hear my dog in the background there if I don't edit this out. He always seems to get thirsty whenever I'm talking, so go figure that one out. Okay, so we can see it's not going to let me install any of these because I already have a newer version installed. So I'm not going to be able to finish this, but if this is your first go through, then you should go right ahead. But otherwise, let's go ahead and close out of there and get started. So now we're going to go File, New. Now instead of a Java project, we're actually going to use a WindowBuilder project. And so you can see I go New, Other. And again, under our WindowBuilder application, I'm going to use the SWT Designer. And the reason I'm using the SWT Designer, I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't used Java in at least 5 years now. I'm primarily a Python girl now. And so as I was trying to update this video, this just seemed to be the one that would work for me. So I hope it works for you too. SWT Designer, we're going to go with SWT-JFace Java project. Go ahead and click Next. And again, I'm going to call this project something like My Calc, which is short for My Calculator. I'm going to do another decision that might make some software engineers out there cringe. I'm going to use the project folder as the root folder. It just keeps things a little bit cleaner for my purposes, but you probably don't need to do that. I'm just going to. I could click Finish before, or if you want to verify things, go and click Next. And then we should be good to go. So now we have our project file ready to be added to. So just like before, we're going to right-click, New, down to Other. And again, under the Window Builder, go into SWT Designer. And then I'm going to go down to SWT and then an application window. I'm not saying that you have to use these configurations. Again, I'm just looking for what seemed to work for me. So here we go, an application window under SWT. And here I'm going to call it my adding calc, because we're going to take two numbers from a user, add them together, and return the value. All right, so the first things first, we're not seeing any errors. That's always a good sign to start with. We have our code template started. Okay, here we go. So we're going to jump over to the Design tab right down here on the bottom. It's going to load for us. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And in fact, if you made it to this point, the previous video probably would work just fine, but for completeness sake, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So you can see this looks a little bit small here. If I click on the corner drag, we can see the size in terms of, let's see, width and height. I just want it bigger. I think those values are pixel sizes, but gosh, I don't know. So we start with this foundation. We're going to go ahead again. We start off by adding a layout. I'm a fan of a grid layout, which is just going to use a grid to align all of our components. Pretty self-explanatory. And we're going to start off by a label. Again, we can see when I hover over here, we get this beautiful grid. I'm going to start by calling this label input One, you can use something more descriptive if you think it'd be helpful, like maybe you say give number 1, but here we are. I'm going to change this variable name by coming over to the properties panel. In fact, let me make it a little bit larger here. Let's see, I'm going to call this variable input. Gosh, spelling is not my strong suit. Input1 underscore LBL for label. Your naming convention doesn't matter so much, just as long as you stay consistent. It really helps things further down the line. Now this is looking pretty small and sad, so let's go ahead and adjust some of our other properties here, starting with the font size. 9 is a pretty small number. Let's go ahead and make it big. And there we go. So now that I have this label, I'm going to want to create one that's nearly identical. And we can go ahead and right click on our components window on this variable that we just created. Go copy. And then paste. Now nothing happens immediately. In fact, we get the red stop sign with our mouse. But if we come over to our grid, we can see it lights up just as if we were clicking and dragging. So that's looking pretty good. Again, I'm going to have to adjust the label just a little, the variable name, excuse me, the variable name just a little bit so it's consistent. Variable 2 or input 2 underscore LBL. And I think that should, and the text, of course. So again, you can double click over here, but this is going to be our input 2. All right, so let's do a quick sanity check because it's always nice to make sure that things are working like we think they are. I'm going to go ahead and run my project. It's going to take a moment to build it here and show it up off screen, but if I click it over to this screen, we can see, okay, great sanity check. We're off to a good start. And so the next step, we probably want to take input from the users, which is going to be this text control over here. I'm going to go ahead and start by putting that there. It already filled it, which is nice, but it looks a little narrow because again, if we come over here, again, this is only font size 9. We probably want that to be consistent. So if we click on the 3 dots, again, adjust to 30 and click OK. So it didn't actually change the font because there's no actual words in there. We could add some default values if we want, but for now, let's go ahead and leave it blank. And again, I'm going to change this to input 1 underscore txt because this is a text field, not a label field. And so let's go ahead and again, copy, paste. And I'm sorry, I know this is probably a little bit repetitive as you're sitting there watching, but you know, sometimes I like to have my hands held as I try to figure out new things. Let's see, input2.txt. Yeah, that should work for us. Okay, so once again, sanity checks. It's always good to make sure things are working like you think they are. Let's go 5, 6. Great. We're able to put in numbers. So now we just gotta, find ways to make them do things with the numbers. So we're probably gonna want to add some sort of button. I'll put it there. I want this to be a big button that fills the available space. Now, when the user clicks on this button, I want it to take the text from input 1, input 2, and then add them together and return the value. So I think a logical text to put on this would be add. And just like we've done before, again, you probably got the hang of this. I don't need to be so repetitive. Maybe when I'm editing the video, I'll chop it out, but probably not. Editing videos are kind of a lot of work. Okay, so this is looking more promising. In fact, I'm actually going to make this bold because our button's exciting. Let's go and make it a little more exciting by changing the color of the words. So if we come over here, we can see a number of different color palettes. I'm going to go with a purple. It's probably obnoxious to many of you, but I'm kind of an obnoxious person sometimes, so we'll do that bright, colorful purple. And now you probably hear my dog in the background drinking water, so we're going to wait while he finishes. Okay, so let's go ahead and then add a label so we can return what the actual values are. This is kind of just a placeholder. In fact, we could leave it blank if we wanted to. I'm just going to put 0.0 because it makes sense to me. And to make it align a little bit better, I'm going to fill the whole space. And actually, let's go ahead and center that. Again, that's another properties, alignment. Click on left, we'll change that to center. You can probably guess the rest. Let's go ahead and make this a nice big font that's also bold. To go with my lovely purple, let's make this a little bit of a Joker theme and go with a green. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. There we go. So let's say 5, 6. Now when we click add, what we want to have happen is have this label change the value. However, we can see nothing's happening yet, so that's our indication that we need to add some code. So go ahead and close here. Now you have two options. You can come over to our components, find the button, oh my goodness, which I didn't change that variable name. I'm going to do that really quickly right now to add BTN, which is short for button. So it's consistent with all the other naming formats I've used. Again, this sounds like a silly step, but it's something that really saved my sanity when these projects start to spin out of control. And so you can either right click here and go to event, add event handler, or you can even come over to our design window and right click on the button itself and add event handler. Now I'm just looking for a mouse event, and so we could do double click, but to keep things simple, I'm just going to go mouse down, because that means anytime the mouse goes down on this button, we're going to write a method, which we can see automatically takes us over to our source code, which is really handy because we are about to write some code. You can always get back to the design tab by clicking on the design tab. Alright, so when this button has a mouse down event, we're going to want to take the numbers that the users gave us, which we're just going to say they're integers for simplicity's sake. Given 1 is going to be equal to. Now this is where having named our variables a consistent name is going to help us, because I think I remember that is, oh my gosh, input. I don't know why I want to put that. Input 1 underscore txt is the actual text field dot get text. Now we can see, you might see a problem already if you're very talented and paying attention, that this is telling us that this is a string. So what get text does is return a string. We're a little bit of trouble here because I just said that this variable should be holding an integer. And so we're going to have to wrap this in a function that's going to help us turn this into an integer, which is pretty straightforward, but I'll be honest with you, I don't always remember what it is. I had to Google it just before this video. So, don't ever feel bad about having to Google these types of things if you can't quite remember them. But what we're going to do is use a method called parseInt, which will turn this, if we hover over it, it's going to hopefully tell us what it does. And so it's taking in a string. Because it's integer class, we could probably deduce that this is going to give us an integer. Oh, we still have an angry red line. That's because I forgot that silly semicolon. Oh, Java. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this line because, my second text input field is pretty similar. Given 2, we're going to take input to txt to get text. All right, so then we're able to calculate our answer, which is going to be int answer. I'm going to actually call this results is equal to given 1 plus given, given 2, semicolon to finish. All right, so now we have the numbers. The last step we have to do is to update our label so it reflects these results. Now this is going to be, again, a little tricky, but let's go ahead and get started by starting with that variable, which, let's see, I believe I call that answer label. And just like we did with the get text, we're going to go, let's see, set text. Pretty familiar format, but we can see that we were already running into a problem. And so if we hover over these angry red lines, we can see that this cannot be resolved. Now I already kind of know what this problem is, and Sometimes it's a little bit irritating to make sure everything lines up like it should, but you know, as a spoiler alert, if we scroll down here towards the bottom, we can see that oh my goodness, let's double check that that's actually the name of our variable. Oh my gosh, I didn't change that var variable. So again, that's on me. Let's call this answer label. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to our code. And we can see I'm still getting an error. But if you think about it, we added the label towards the end. And so if I scroll down towards the bottom here, yeah, so we don't declare this answer label until the very end of our code. And so this method is getting a little angry because it's like, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to do a quick sloppy move of the code and hope that it works for the best. Like I said, this can be kind of frustrating sometimes. It's just kind of the way it is. Let's see, I think that worked for me. But you know, if it doesn't work for you, sometimes you might have to go a little slower and make sure that all your parentheses match up like they should. Now we can see I'm still getting some errors here under the set text. That's because this is empty, it's looking for a string. And so I can go results. It's still not solving things because again, results is an integer. That's just the way I had it defined. And so we're going to do something very similar to how we go integer.parseInt. We're going to go integer.toString. And then wrap that with appropriate parentheses. Okay, great. So now we don't have any more errors that are immediately apparent. Like I said, this last step might take some practice for you guys. Don't get discouraged. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, so here's the moment of truth. Let's go ahead and click add. And look at that. It looks like it's actually giving us what we're hoping for. So you can keep playing with this all you want to convince yourself that it's doing what we think it's doing. And you're probably not too impressed. This is a pretty basic program. But you know, sometimes you just need a starting point so you can go create all the wonderful things yourself. So as I said, I really hope that this helps you guys get started in 2020 and further and have fun designing your programs.